to the Security Squawk podcast, where we discuss the business of cybersecurity. Here are your co-hosts and cybersecurity experts, Brian Horning, Reginald Andre, and Randy Bryan.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. Welcome back to your little boxes.
Hey, what's up?
Something else, the fake audience always puts a little smile on our faces, right?
Why do you say they're fake? You know they're sitting in your living room.
Yeah, they're on the other side of my office.
So you guys made it back from Nash Vegas. You're live in one piece. Congratulations.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
Love to kind of, just before we go into our main topic for today's show, hear both of your perspectives and takeaways that could benefit our audience from what you heard or what you saw last week while you were in Nashville. I did watch when I could over Zoom, so I did see some of the content myself. So but I'd like to hear from you guys, because it's you can't replicate being there, right? You know, so you get to talk to people, and your takeaways may not necessarily be somebody who was on stage, but you know, some conversation you had in a back hallway or a dinner or something like that. So we'll jump into that. Before we do, guys, remember we don't charge any kind of monetary fee to get this content, nor do we bore you with ads and things like that. So please just remember to share our show. And if you could rate us on your favorite podcasting platform, if you so choose to listen to us over a podcast. Otherwise, hit us up on social media with a share and a like, and we'd appreciate it. So, guys, the whole purpose of your trip last week, I guess, was to go. It's a mastermind group that the three of us are members of, and you guys go there on a quarterly basis to kind of, you know, sharpen the sword on the business. And that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, you know, working on sales and marketing. It could be working on operations, or just getting educated on new things that are happening in our industry around cybersecurity and stuff like that. So with that being kind of setting the stage for our audience of what it is that you guys were at, what were your big takeaways, or what was something that you can share with the audience that you think might benefit them, that they should know? Because I know there was a couple FBI guys there. One guy retired, one guy's current. You know, I don't know if any of those guys brought anything to light to you, but would love to hear from you guys about it. So
I'll sum it up in 2 words. We're screwed. Don't think that if your company gets a ransomware attack or some type of business compromise, the FBI or the government is going to come and save you. They have a much bigger fish to fry, and they have made it a very clear point that unless you are, you got the numbers, Randy?
Yes. It was if there's $1 million or more ransom in Nashville, they'll talk to you. If it's 100 million in New York, they'll talk to you. So if you're mom and pop small business and you got $100,000 ransom, I mean, unless you reach out to like the Paducah, Kansas office, which I don't even think exists, you're screwed, like you said. You know what I mean? I would highly suggest. I know we have some other professionals that watch us, but if you're a business owner or a professional, reach out to your local FBI office now and build some relationships. You know, we make a joke. No one has a Rolodex anymore, but literally somebody said it from the stage. Have that person in your Rolodex. You know, reach out to somebody that's like a local from the FBI. See if you can take them to lunch or go have coffee with them or hop on a Zoom call or something, just to build that relationship. But yeah, I forgot about that, man. That is a big takeaway, because basically you're on your own if you're under $1 million, or if you're in New York, you're on your own if you're under 100 million.
Yeah. And another thing that they mentioned is the importance of actually reporting the crime. So even if you don't meet their thresholds, a lot of times they can use what happened to you to build up their case in another, maybe in another company that met that threshold, and then they can add you to that as well. So a lot of times we think, oh, should we even submit it, because all we're going to just do is get an automated response, but they actually use this for their data intelligence and for future prosecution.
Yeah. I talked to a guy at the place who had he wasn't big enough to reach the threshold, but he had the same attack, and he had I guess filled out a report, but they reached out to him for some more information just so they could collate it with the other information that they had.
Yeah. So we've been involved with a couple incidents with the FBI being involved. There's a couple of things that I noticed, and I agree with all the things that you guys said. Number one, there has to be monetary damage already that happened, because when we try to get help when something hasn't happened, we're trying to give a heads up that, hey, we're seeing this over here. That gets way less attention than an active criminal event, if that's what you want to call it. The other thing I see too is they're more apt to help companies or individuals where national security is at stake versus just monetary. When they're seeing something where data or something can be used, and it could be a national security issue or a threat, they'll swoop in and take action before an event happens in those cases. But if we're just talking about a private business that's losing money, you're going to have to lose the money first before they get involved, unfortunately, or be very close. So good one, Andre. Nice, quick and easy. So Randy, what did you take away from that event?
Oh, I was going to I was going to mention the FBI agent as well.
Okay.
That was a pretty fascinating.
Who was the FBI agent? Are you allowed to say?
He would, he was. So we had the retired famous FBI agent,
Chris Voss, right?
Dude, he was awesome.
Right.
This guy, really funny. A lot of stuff. The other one was just like, I think he's like the head of the Nashville office or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating just to hear basically everything we talk about, but using a lot of some different language, some different stats, coming at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, from a law enforcement perspective.
Yes, that was fascinating to me. Like I couldn't hear enough of it, because just how cool it was. And that really, I mean, that was probably the most impactful one for me. It also was helpful from a standpoint of lots of affirmation, because a lot of things like I'm thinking, hey, I need to be doing this, and that. And to hear an FBI agent say, yeah, when we go in, we do this, and that. So a lot of good affirmation there on, techniques and things like that. So, but yeah, that was my big takeaway.
Nice.
I think Andre had something to add.
Yeah, I add it real quick. Another thing that he mentioned is if they are doing an investigation, one of the reasons why it takes so long is because, we have the portrayal of the movies, and in 45 minutes and 3 commercials, they can go ahead and, put some wiretaps and hack into someone's system. But he talked about how long these investigations take. And then now when they get all the information they need, they have to give it to the district attorney. And then district attorney then decides if, based on their resources, if it's worth for them to do, and if they have, how strong of a case. So it's not just like, his decision to go after it, but it's also somebody else that has the greater power of B. And then there was actually, that's it. There was one more, but I just drew a blank on it.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So, I mean, it's always good to step away from the business and get this kind of insight on what's going on out there. At least, connect with the people who, are fighting this fight in all different places. So But yeah, I love Andre's takeaway 100%. I mean, that was probably, I think, for the three of us, the biggest things that people need to understand is that, not only is the government and the FBI not going to come to your rescue, a lot of times if you're not working with companies like the three of ours, your cyber insurance isn't going to come and rescue you either. And we're going to talk about that in this in this podcast today. We came in our research in one of our previous podcasts, we came across an article that we feel like encapsulates a lot of what we talk about on this show. So if you listen to us a lot, this is going to sound very redundant, but I think we're going to try to condense a lot of what we talked about over the last year or so into one episode today. And that's really a discussion around of why do businesses and organizations fail to prevent cyber attacks. I think what we do typically on this show is we normally try to go about it in a way where we look at an article and what they're saying in an article and what they're saying around a specific cyber event, and we try to kind of tell you why this is happening or what we're seeing or what our opinion is on that specific event. But again, this particular article goes into a couple different things that I think we talk about here and there, and we don't talk about in one kind of episode. So I think this will be a good time for us to kind of look at things in terms of here's the reasons why companies are getting attacked, and then we can bring in past and current ransomware attacks, because man, there's a ton of them out there. And we could definitely spend all show talking about ransomware attacks that are happening right now. But, we do want to kind of switch things up and keep a little bit of variety in the show, in the how we do things and how we talk about, kind of like we did last week when the two of them were together and we talked about one very specific topic, which was, making sure you stay safe while you travel. So go check that episode out if you missed it. So guys, number one thing, I guess I'm going to kind of read this article at a high level real quick in the beginning, because I think it starts to paint the picture of what gets talked about here. But the article starts off by saying cyber attacks are an ever increasing threat to businesses and organizations worldwide. But despite increased awareness and investment in cybersecurity, many businesses and organizations fail to prevent these attacks. And they're going to take a closer look at some of the reasons why they fail, along with some top tips on how to embed a solid cybersecurity structure. So the very first thing they state is that organizations and businesses underestimated the threat. And it says that one key problem when it comes to cybersecurity is not truly knowing how serious or damaging the threat can be. And while many organizations recognize the need to protect themselves from cyber attacks, they may underestimate the risk or believe they will not be a target for an attack. This can lead to organizations misjudging the cost of a successful attack and overlooking the need to invest in security. So an example of this is an organization that underestimated the threat is the Danish transport company Maersk. And in June of 2017, they were exposed to an extensive cyber attack, which largely paralyzed their company's IT systems and caused the company to lose millions in revenue. And post-attack, the company's CEO stated that Maersk had never imagined that they would be the target of such an attack, and that the company had underestimated the risk. So a couple of things here. Number one, in 2017, those comments don't surprise me. If they were kind of said today, I'd be a little concerned. I'm not giving them a pass because in 2017, this was a known thing. I just think that back then, not many companies took it very seriously. Why I think maybe we're about 25% of the companies get it. The other 75 are still in this kind of bucket where Maersk was in 2017. That's kind of my view of the world right now. So thoughts on this, guys, or other examples that come to mind where a company just didn't think that they would get attacked?
I mean, so thoughts on this? It's kind of like, back in like the 60s, my granddad used to smoke. Like everybody smoked back then, smoked cigarettes. And they were aware that there were dangers, but no one really knew how deep those dangers went. And it took a concerted effort, from all kinds of organizations publishing information. And then ultimately it took the getting involved to really make people aware. And I see this all the time when I'm talking to businesses. If they haven't been hacked yet, they have no idea just how deep it'll go. We hear business say, well, we'll just delete everything, and start with new systems. Well, that doesn't change the fact that you're required by law to report breaches in most states, or they say, well, we'll just close down that company and start a new one. Literally had a company tell us that. And then when they started a new one, they were so shocked that the ransomware showed up on all their new stuff. Well, because they never figured out what caused it. And I could go on and on about it, but basically they're not aware of how the reputations get affected. They're not aware of the money that it costs. It's on and on. I'm sure Andre has some stuff to add to that, so I don't want to steal your thunder, man.
No, it's cool. I mean, it goes back to that line that we always, hear from our clients. I'm too small to get hacked. Why would someone, I'm a small little manufacturing company or, little shop, little mom and pop, what are they going to get from me? And that's what we hear all the time when we're prospecting with clients and they're calling us and we're telling them our prices compared to what, other IT providers may be providing. It's always that the customers just think that I'm too small and hackers are not going to come after me.
Yeah, and that reminded me of the guy. Is it Krebs, who used to be the head of CISA? He was at one of our last 2 quarterly events ago, and he said basically there's 2 kinds of businesses: those that know they're hacked and those that don't know it yet. Like he raised and he's also, what is he? And he's like an ex-FBI guy, but he also raised like just a dire situation, and so anyway, you're not too small. You're never too small to get hacked. And if you have any way of making money, then you're going to be a target for criminals.
Yeah, 100%. So the other piece of this is, Maersk, the company I referenced, they're a fairly large company, to say the least.
World.
Yeah, and I don't want any small business owner who may be watching this to kind of think, well, I'm not the size of Maersk, that doesn't apply to me, because in Verizon's 2022 breach report, the number one action for very small businesses in their research is ransomware. Most very small businesses, the number one problem that they deal with is ransomware. Second most common is use of stolen credentials. That usually means business email compromise. And then social attacks such as phishing and other types of phishing attacks are the third most common. So small organizations, just because you're super small doesn't preclude you from, any kind of cyber attack. It may not end up being ransomware a lot of times, and that's why you see these other 2 categories that are listed. So don't underestimate any of this, because like we talk about on the show all the time, you're just an address to these people. They'll figure out what you are once they get in there and what they want to do with you once they have access. But them getting access, they don't know if you, prior to getting access, they don't know if you're a Fortune 500 company or you're a small mom and pop, florist, that has 3 employees. They'll figure that out once they're in. And at that point, it's too late, right, guys? So the second thing pointed out in this article is inadequate investment in security. And I think this is one of those things that we discuss all the time on this show is businesses just really don't understand what they need to be spending revenue-wise on something that, quite frankly, they really haven't had to spend too much money on. They are I look at cybersecurity as kind of like part two of IT. And, IT, just talking about buying computers and networking equipment and doing all those things the right way. There was a serious lack of investment, in my opinion, on what businesses really needed to spend there across the board. And now you're piling cybersecurity on top of that. So not only do you already have a gap with your IT spend, but now you're saying, okay, now you have to spend more money on this new thing over here called cybersecurity, or all this investment you made in IT is all for naught because it's going to be destroyed if some criminal hacker can get their hands on your system. So let's talk about this a little bit. And I don't know if you guys heard any of this when you were in Nashville last week, but what are you guys looking at in terms of inadequate investment in security? I know that on this show, we kind of talk about all the time that 3 to 6% of top line revenue as kind of like the barometer of where you should be. That might need to be a little bit higher, or it could be a little bit lower based on your business and, your level of risk and whether you have compliance that's driving that. So just level set that right there. What are your guys' thoughts on, inadequate investment in security with businesses across the board? Do you think that this is a problem that is going to be solved anytime soon, or where are your thoughts on this?
I mean, you want to go first, Andre?
That's fine. It all goes back to when they get compromised. That's when the budget will appear.
You say that all the time.
Show me the money after the fact. That's when all of a sudden the wallet opens. Okay, we need to make sure this never happens again. What you mentioned, Brian, a lot of customers and a lot of people out there just say, give me what is needed to keep the lights on. Okay, just basic antivirus, a little router, firewall, that's it. But even as we're going to these shows every quarter and we're meeting with vendors and realizing wow, we didn't know we needed this product. We never thought of this. We need our administrator passwords to change every 30 days because this is what the hackers are doing. So it's for us, we're, it's kind of candy shopping because it's bells and whistles and shiny objects. But at the same time, a lot of times we'll see these companies with either an IT director or in-house IT guy, or just not having the knowledge. They just think that what they learned in school 20 years ago is just still good and they know it all. And the industry is changing, especially on the cybersecurity side.
It's changing so much. And, we usually tell people 1 to 3% of gross rev ought to be spent specifically on cybersecurity. So that's on top of your regular IT. That's probably where they get the 3 to 6% total. But regardless of 1 to 6%, even the 1%, when I'm talking with a small business owner and we start to discuss that, I can't speak for all the businesses out there, but I just constantly, it's like I can almost count on it that I'm going to hear pushback from the small business owner. Like, there's no way that I should spend that. And you're right, Andre, they do ask, hey, what do I just got to have to keep the lights on? But really, we got to turn it back to them. And we need to think as a small business owner, what do I got to do to keep the doors open? Because that matters more than anything. Like, the lights could go out for a little bit. That's not a big deal. But when the doors close, and the doors have to close when you're in the middle of a breach, you're probably not going to be receiving money. You're not going to be able to do payroll. If you do payroll, do you have money set aside to do payroll in an unaffected bank account that's not hacked? It affects a lot, and the doors can literally be closed. It's in the high 80s, I believe, or might be high 70s of all businesses that have a ransomware are out of business within 6 months. I know it's double digit, and I know it's a huge number, but yeah. So I run against it all the time, Brian. To answer your question, push from that.
So I want to dive into this a little bit more because this is one of those conversations that we talk about in our mastermind group where things have changed, right? And it's not just the investment that you're required to spend on something that you didn't even exist 5-7 years ago. But there is an absolute hesitancy, or just these companies are hesitating to invest for two reasons, in my opinion. Cost being number one, and number two being guys like us are telling them, like, hey, yeah, you have to invest in this, but it's not a silver bullet. And we say that on the show all the time. Like, this is a layered approach. It's always going to be best effort. There's nothing out there that's going to completely secure you, because you have employees, because you have users, all the things we say on the show. And that scares the crap out of a lot of, business leaders and owners who are making these decisions, because it's like, you're asking me to spend a significant amount of money on something that's not even a guarantee. And the other thing that's changed is it's changed from a provider standpoint, right? And I think this is a part that we need to talk about too. Providers are now no longer, because I think before we started doing this, guys, I think the prevalent situation a lot of IT companies found themselves in was that the company, their client, thought that they were being taken care of, right? That was the thought process here. Now, because of all these events, because of lawyers, because of all the things that we talk about on the show that happen as we learn things from every single event that happens, you now have most IT companies, if they're worth anything and they know their business, they're putting out documents and they're making people sign things that say you're declining a recommendation that we're making, right? So if you don't want to invest in this and you don't want to invest in that, well, I'm not going to be left holding the bag when something happens. You're going to sign this thing that says you're declining our recommendation, and you're going to not hold us liable should something bad happen. And that's leading to these organizations just accepting greater risk, because now you're faced with option A or option B. I buy the service and I spend the money and I reduce my risk, or I say no, I save the money, and then I accept all the risk into my business if something bad were to happen. That's kind of where we're at today, right? Did I do a good job of like kind of laying that out?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where we are right now. And before, it used to be shared risk, right? Before companies like ours started to kind of figure this out and figure out like, wow, if you don't have certain agreements in place and those agreements don't say certain things, you're accepting a lot of liability when your customers don't make good decisions. And that's changing, and that's falling all back onto the businesses these days. If the IT company that they're working with is doing things the right way. There's still IT companies out there that are doing things the old way, and they're not making you sign these things. And just because ambiguous contracts, they are the ones who are also in bed with you, or they also eat the risk sandwich with you. But that's becoming harder and harder to find. Agree?
Yeah. And we all here on the show, we belong to, just like how your organization could have an accounting group or,
Right.
trade group. So we belong to what is called a managed service providers group on Facebook. There's about 20,000 people in that group all over the US and Canada, Australia. And I would guess only about 10% of them out of this 20,000 get it, where they're doing cybersecurity. So a lot of times you'll even have, going back to the cost, when they're like, hey, how much are you charging a client, or how much would you charge a client for this? And then when, one of the people that get it gives a response as far as what the price, what we would charge for our price to just help out our fellow peer members, they're like, oh my gosh, you're ripping off the customer. Why do they need all of this? So we're battling against our I don't want to call them competitors, but in the scheme of things, our competitors, that they don't even get it. They think they're still in that old mindset that, this stuff can just be done with open source or, freeware or just the basics.
Yep. And a good example of this is when Target, they suffered their data breach about 10 years ago now, it's still, one of the more talked about breaches that's happened because, they had a contractor who had access to their system, and hackers were able to use that person's, they were victimized, or they were exploited. They were able to use the access that they had on that person's computer to then infiltrate their point of sale systems, which were not adequately secured, which then caused a huge problem for Target to the tune of $200 million, which in today's money would have been a hell of a lot more. So a big lesson learned there for a big company to, make sure that they adequately invest in things like, in this case, what they failed to do is they failed to invest in an intrusion detection system. And that could have alerted the company to suspicious activity that was going on, and they didn't do that. So most businesses today, and in Target in 2013, I think that they should have at that time had an IDS system in place. Most small businesses can get an IDS system now. Back then, that really wasn't the case. But in 10 years, the technology has improved and evolved, and the cost has come down to the point where most businesses can have some sort of IDS system in place that somebody is monitoring for, suspicious activity on your network. We talk about this all the time, guys. I remember talking about Western Digital like 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? Saying like, wow, they were able to move that much data off their network, terabytes of data, and nobody noticed. And I said it on the show, that's evidence that they didn't have an IDS system in place. So the other thing that this talks about is the ever-changing threat picture, and then the inability for organizations to adapt to the constantly changing threat landscape is also a factor. Cyber criminals are constantly developing new techniques and tactics to circumvent security systems, and organizations that cannot adapt to these changes will be vulnerable to attack. We talked about this, I think, a few weeks ago as well, when we talked about all these botnets that are now basically able to go around and quickly determine if you have vulnerabilities in your network that they can exploit, and then exploit them. Simply being security conscious is no longer enough, nor is having a prevention-only strategy. Organizations must arm themselves to survive attacks, maintain operations, and embrace new technology in the face of evolving threats. This means establishing policies and processes that strike a balance between protecting critical assets, detecting compromises, and responding to incidents. Thoughts there, guys?
Yeah.
We talk about a lot of this all the time. What are your thoughts, Randy?
So I was thinking of something else the FBI agent said, and this is so true and so applicable to today in 2023 and almost June. Is he said ChatGPT is going to be a game changer for phishing emails and for other emails that are meant to be malicious. Where he said, like right now, you get an email, and if you're in America and it says something like, kindly, please, blah blah blah, like you instantly a flag goes up because no one in America says that. We just ask for it. And you see other certain words now, if they come in on an email, it throws up all kinds of red flags. But with ChatGPT, you can say, write this email in the tone of somebody who lives in, San Marcos, Texas. And then ChatGPT will spit it out, and it won't have kindly in it. So when we're talking about the changing threat landscape, that's going to be a huge one because emails are going to be almost undetectable, malicious from a legit email.
So what should business owners do so they can stay up to date on this threat landscape?
They need to have competent companies like us be able to help them. No longer is the day of your IT guy or your cousin who comes in whenever there's a problem, just comes and fix it on the weekends or something. Now it's you need to mature your technology, and you need to have a real budget.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that show IT Crowd. I don't know if y'all have watched it. Y'all really should watch it. And so, an IT Crowd, they hire an IT director for an office, and she just went in to apply just for grins to see what happened. She knew nothing about IT, and they're like, "What do you know about IT?" And she's like, "Well, I'm really good at Facebook." And the guy goes, "Oh," and he leans over and he's like, "Interesting. Tell me more." And then she goes on and she's like, "I'm really good at updating my phone." And he's like, "Wow, you're blowing me away. What other qualities do you have?" And she names like 3 things, and they hired her. So anyway, I was thinking of that when you said your nephew that's good at IT. We got to be careful these days. We can't just hire somebody that's good on Facebook and knows how to solve a problem on a computer. It's way more than that these days.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'll point out, and I know you guys don't like to talk about yourselves on the show, but all 3 of our companies can offer companies a threat intelligence service, right? So big or small, if you're smaller, our company, you're only going to get that through one of our managed security service plans. If you're a larger company, we offer, threat intelligence services direct to those larger companies. So threat intelligence services are simply just somebody who's keeping you up to date, sending you, we can deliver it through email, we can deliver it through a portal, we can deliver it through quarterly phone calls with board members and executives. It really depends on what you need. But these are the types of things that people, I think, don't realize they need, right? And there's companies out there that can provide services around this, so you are not in the dark about what's going on out there, because a lot of these regulations are changing. The laws are being put on the books. Cyber insurance is requiring people have threat intelligence information sent to them. And if they're not getting it, these things become in jeopardy. Cyber insurance claims become in jeopardy. Even getting cyber insurance becomes in jeopardy. And if you go for government contracts or anything like that, all of these things are going to, become an issue for you to maintain if you don't start doing things like getting threat intelligence reports into your company. So along with that, right into it, information sharing is the next thing they talk about in here, guys. And it's cooperation and sharing of information can help reduce the risk of cyber attacks. This is known, and I think the 3 of us would agree on this. But many organizations hesitate to share information about security risks, which can limit opportunities for collaboration and interaction between organizations and prevent a holistic approach to cybersecurity. So let's talk about this a little bit, because I bring this up in the context of all the time of we're not finding out as much information anymore around cyber attacks like we used to. And I pointed out that I said that that's a bad thing unless, in the immediate time frame of the event, while it's underway, if information isn't shared, I'm okay with that. But once we go into a lessons learned period and the event's over and done with, I think that that's when information is necessary to be shared. And I don't like it when I see companies just not say anything at all. Guys on board with that, or do you see anything a different way?
I mean, nobody wants their dirty laundry out there, and that's how these organizations are looking at it. I know someone right now dealing with a business email compromise, and there has been strategy sessions with attorneys, with the incident response of, okay, we know these 100 emails got compromised. The threat actor was able to read these emails. They were able to download it. Should we tell them? Should we not tell them? How should we just generalize it? Do we, so there's all of this strategy that's going on right now because nobody wants the liability and that dirty laundry out there. So, and that was a call that I got today on that as far as what's happening. So, no.
And then you have inadequate in training of employees, and this is a big one because as Randy mentioned in the green room, that the FBI agent in Nashville told them that 95% of all of these attacks are born through email, some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean ransomware. It also means business email compromise. These things are all happening 95% of the time because somebody clicks on something or goes to a web page or clicks on an email that sends them somewhere where they give up their username and password and two-factor code, or they click on something that installs malware. And it's simply because employees aren't being trained properly. So employees need to be able to recognize these threats, but they often lack the necessary knowledge and skills to identify and report suspicious activity. Stanford shows as many as 9 out of 10 data breaches are the result of human error, such as employees falling for phishing scams or weak password. Nevertheless, there are many businesses that do not provide their employees with regular security training. So let's talk about that. Regular security training is subjective. Regular could mean once a year or it could mean once a week. Where do you guys fall with this?
In our company and for our clients, we do once a week phishing, and the emails are different for everybody. It's rotated. And then we also do for our clients every 6 months, we do department cybersecurity training in person. So we try best not to do Zoom because, of course, everybody's got 2 screens and they're doing this and then they're just check marking it. So we're making it interactive where we're doing prizes if they answer questions and really just educating them to so that this doesn't happen. And I can even tell you the story that I was just talking about with a friend of mine where they're going through a business compromise. They did a training about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks prior to that, they did a training, and the user still clicked on a email and just made this whole situation they're in now. But even if you beat it upside their head, 95%,
it's why the cybersecurity training is crucial. Like they said, 9 out of 10 of these attacks start by human error. Could have been prevented had the human not clicked on them. But it's also it's not your silver bullet. So you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to have cyber training and therefore knock out 9 out of 10," because people don't always listen. A lot of times they phone it in. They're not really watching. They've got another screen going on and they're filling out spreadsheets or something and then just checking next on the training or whatever. And that leaves you basically vulnerable. So it needs to be part of a layered approach. Hey, let's try to stop them all by not clicking. But if they do, have something in place that stops that. If it gets through that, have something in place that stops that and have as many layers as possible.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that only doing it once a year is a really bad idea. We're a big fan of weekly security trainings that people can digest small bits at a time, maybe 5-minute videos or whatever, and you're keeping it top of mind because you're getting it once a week. 2 sides to that. You got to make sure that you're monitoring that and people are actually doing it and you're having conversations. It should be part of your policy with HR. HR should be handing out acceptable use policies. And part of that is that you're going to do the company provided training, in order to maintain your compliance with that policy. And that's where we see things go off the rails a lot. They fail to implement a policy, and then they fail to give that policy out as part of an HR function. So there's repercussions if they don't do it. And then they fail to follow up on the training once it's sent. Yeah, you sent it out and it ended up in people's mailboxes, or you invited people to a Zoom event, but who showed up? How are you tracking that? How do you know, 50% or 70% or 100% of your company actually attended that training? These are all things that you need to answer to because they're going to come up if you have a breach. And you're going to have to prove that you have a way to know that people are doing this stuff. And then you're going to see people who are not doing as well in the quizzes or the training when they, most training should have some kind of test or quiz to determine the aptitude or what people are actually learning from this. And then the other side of it is, as Andre mentioned, some fake phishing campaigns going on a regular basis. So you can see who employees are more likely to click on something or give up information, and maybe get them a little bit more help than maybe some other people need in the organization. So these are all things you got to look at. But again, it's all things companies like the three of ours help you with all the time. And I would say that one last thing on this with training, it's not a one size fits all. You got to do what's right for your organization based on your maturity and how you really want to have cybersecurity as part of your culture. Once a week might be a little aggressive for some, so maybe it's once a month, right? But I wouldn't go much less than that. So, and then this goes on to state, guys, failure of basic security measures, which I would consider training a basic security measure at this point. But on top of that, strong passwords, regularly updating software, using two-factor authentication. These are considered basic today. And these are all the same reasons that we see companies get breached every single week. Thoughts?
Yeah, and everything that it's now saying that you should do, just know it's not something that the average person can do, the average technician can do. Obviously, investing in technologies can help protect your organization system data. That's a given. Firewalls, antivirus, but I would even say, it's not just going to Best Buy or going online and buying a firewall or asking your IT, hey, I want to piecemeal this. I want to put a firewall. I want to put an antivirus. Because when you do those type of piecemeals and not have like a bigger picture, then guess what? None of these products are talking to each other. So your firewall can be getting slammed and getting an attack, but then it's not talking to the computers. It's not talking to your IT department or your IT person. So don't piecemeal this, and just have that comprehensive plan and have a professional like us that can come in and keep you protected.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Well, just adding to that, another huge one, and I mention it all the time, the unsexiest of all the things you can do, and that's patching. And it's so important to update. And how many times do we hear on this show when we're going through a breach, something happened, last pass, unpatched media server at the house of one of the engineers, opened up the keys to the kingdom for this company. When we see it over and over and over, unpatched, they didn't update this, rack space, unpatched servers. The people running the servers complained too much, didn't like all those updates. Well, sorry guys, you got to do it. So anyway.
No, all good points. Equifax was another one that I can think of that was pointed out in this article, that they failed to patch a known vulnerability in its system, even though a patch had been around for months. I think not patching systems outside of email is the next number one reason you're going to have an issue and have a really bad quarter, because it's just not going to be over in a day. Other interesting thing that Andre mentioned and touched on quickly that I want to kind of bring to everyone's attention as we wrap up here. It's not just about the money here, folks. You also got to think about, if you're a company with one or two IT people, maybe you outsource it all. And you really have to look at like those people who are providing that service to you or to your company, whether that's internal employees or a third party company, because it takes time to do this stuff. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been involved in quite a few incident responses where I've heard from people, and actually I've heard from people too, when we do risk assessments before there's an actual incident, where we've uncovered something and we've told them. And I hear a lot from these IT, especially IT directors. Oh, we've been meaning to do that. We've been meaning to get to that, or we've been meaning to implement that. And it's not a money thing. It's just the time required to do it and to learn it and to understand it. And at some point, I think leaders have to look at their situation and go, we're not moving quick enough. And we have to look outside the organization to get help with this. And you know, I feel like I need to say it, not because I want to promote our companies or I think you should work with the three of us. I think you should just work with somebody, and I don't care who that is. Stop trying to go about this alone. But when you see reports like this where companies are just not doing enough, and these are the reasons why, working with a third-party companies is starting to make more and more sense every single day. When you look at what you'd have to pay a company like ours versus what you're going to have to pay on the other side of Boom, the cost difference is probably a tenth or a third, depending on your organization. So I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts. Those were mine, because Andre, you briefly touched on the fact that, like, you know, these companies with like one person IT, you know, people that run the whole IT group. A lot of times these companies are expecting these people to kind of do these things. And the reality of it is they don't have the bandwidth to do it all. So
and they don't want to tell their board or boss that they don't, because then
they don't.
No,
100% they don't. They're not going to be forthright and forthcoming and be like, hey, we can't get all this done. It's just going to be on the list of stuff that has to get done. Right. But if that's number 20 on the list, you better hope you don't have a cyber attack before they get to number 20, which in most cases, number 20 is probably 2 years away.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing with Suffolk, I think it was Suffolk County.
Yeah.
Where they know, but they just got other fires.
I mean, I see it all the time. We run risk assessments all the time, and that's probably the number one answer that we get when we point things out when there's, you know, an IT person who's present or involved, is that they just say, oh yeah, we've been meaning to get to that. And it's like, okay, well, you know, the hackers aren't waiting for you to get to it. So, all right, guys, thank you. 51 minutes in, I think that's long enough. And I appreciate your inputs, and we'll see everyone in the next episode next week. Take care.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.